With these two novelizations I read this week, I might as well have been watching the ultimate director's cut of their respective movies. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. You're with Chris, and today I'll be wrapping up week 2 of Horror Mayhem, the awesome reading project created by the bookish Bryants. And this week it was all about movie week. So in its basic definition, this prompt was all about reading books based on movies, or any movies that were made into books or novelizations, or anything non-fiction about movies as well. The scope was fairly wide. Now, before I go on, I will give you a heads up that there will be spoilers in this video. I couldn't talk about these books without revealing spoilers because the books are starkly different to their respective movies, which was a real eye-opener for me, and I had a great experience. Now, originally I was going to read Poltergeist and The Omen. Now, I finished 2 short novels this week, so I did actually read Poltergeist and enjoyed it so much that I decided not to read The Omen. Instead, I quickly picked up back-to-back Poltergeist II, The Other Side. Both of these novels were novelised by James Caan. Now, if you don't know who he is very famous for novelising Return of the Jedi and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, both of which I read as a kid and loved it. I did really enjoy James Caan's writing with these 2 reads, and I had an absolute ball. Added to that, I wanted to immerse myself completely into the Poltergeist universe, so I did get extra credit on the bingo scorecard for alternate media because I ended up watching for the upteenth time Poltergeist 1, Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, Poltergeist 3, and the recent remake from 2015. So I just wanted to really have a very thematic week all about Poltergeist, and I had such a good time with it. It was great. The main thing is I couldn't believe how different the books were to the movies. I knew going in that there might have been things missing from the movies, but I had no idea there would be such large sections of the book that didn't make it into the final theatrical releases. And I did predict going in that it would read a little bit differently, especially if the writer, James Caan in this case, received an early script rather than the shooting script, because sometimes in movies, if something doesn't quite work, the script needs to be changed. Sometimes they've got a writer on the set typing up fresh copy on the fly and printing it out and handing it to the actors. I think with both these books, I think James Caan would have got early scripts that had since been altered, and that's probably the reason why some events in these books didn't make it into the final releases. But I had no problem with that because I got a whole lot out of the books that I haven't got from the movies, and that was the main experience I took away from this. It was absolutely fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about Poltergeist, the original novel. So I'll go through the plot very briefly. Anyone that's seen the movie knows the plot. The Freeling family, made up of Steve, the dad, Diane, the mum, Dana, the older sister, Robbie, the older brother, to Carol Ann, who is only a little tacker in this, and she is most famous for uttering those lines, "They're here." So they have been, they moved into the first house of a building development, which Steve is the main real estate salesman for, and he's been closing sales left, right and centre. And the effort is to create this community, this neighbourhood where families can come together and flourish, and everything is all light-hearted at the start until a couple of strange happenings occur, like chairs stacking up on themselves, and a funny little scene where there is a section of the kitchen floor that propels someone along as if by a magnet, and Diane places a football helmet on little Carrie Ann, and she slides across the floor from one end to the other, and just a couple of minor things as well. Enough to pique Diane's interest and make it kind of fun, but it's not fun for long. And it's not long before Carol Ann gets targeted by these entities from the other side who crave her pure life force, and of course she gets taken to the other side, and the family have to get her back, and they pull in outside resources in the form of a research team at a local university who try and help, but then it's ultimately Tangina who plays a bit of a part as well, the Magic Munchkin. uh, uses her powers to help get Carol Ann back from the other side. So that's basically in a nutshell. And what I'm going to do now is go through some extras that did not appear in the movie. So this is where the real spoilers begin. Okay, let's talk about Robbie and the clown doll. Now, you know in the movie that it strangles him, right, when he looks under the bed. But before that, before the shit really hits the fan, there's an incident that didn't make it into the movie where Robbie is down in the yard and there's a cinder block pile and he's looking for something, and the clown is buried within the pile. No one knows how it got there. So it was a real creepy scene to read about, and that was the first of many extras that didn't make it into the movie, which it was like going on a big Easter egg hunt and finding all this new stuff that I wasn't aware of, and it just made the whole Poltergeist experience with the books and the films much more special. Now, the ugly man reference that Carol Ann describes the entity as, that doesn't get mentioned until Poltergeist 3, when she's being hypnotised by Dr. Seaton, where she says the ugly man's going to get her. And it's mentioned in the first book, which was really interesting because there is no mention of the preacher Cain until the second film. It's just all about what might be on the other side in terms of restless spirits and things like that. Now, there is also a visit to a sleep-order doctor that Diane takes Carol Ann to, which is interesting as well. That didn't make it into the movie. I found that very, very interesting. There is a couple of scenes with one of the research assistants. I think it was Ryan, and he's a skeptic and relies on science to explain weird happenings, and unfortunately he gets a good dose of the supernatural. He gets frozen on the spot by the mysterious entity, and he can't do anything about spiders coming out of the bathroom and crawling up his legs and scuttling into his mouth and biting him inside his mouth and throat and strangling him, and it's a pure nightmare, one I wouldn't want to have. Let me reassure you of that. And it's all an illusory experience, so it doesn't actually really happen, but it makes the experience feel real to him. And there's also a scene where his body changes into a monster-like form as well, but it's only an illusion, and he recovers from it. But Jesus Christ, does he get a scare. And I think a scene like that you can picture very well in your head that the best special effects in Hollywood just can't live up to. So reading scenes like that was very good. There were a couple of chapters just on Tangina as well. So you really got a good character study of Tangina, who she is, what she thinks about her own powers. She doesn't want these powers. They are a burden to her. And she goes to the research team and asks them to get rid of the powers for her, but ultimately she knows she gets a calling to help the Freeling family, and she does come through for them. But it's a very interesting character study that I had no idea about, and this is one of the reasons why the novels go a little bit deeper than the movies in some aspects. Okay, now it goes into a bit of depth about the entities on the other side. So there's different types of entities that are featured in here, which got a little bit out there, but it's something that was described in the book that couldn't make it into the movie if it tried, I don't think, because it was just really, really weird about these entities. And but it was still interesting, but got a little bit freaky at times. And the main thing about reading the books as opposed to the movies is that you're able to get into the characters' heads. Watching a movie, you cannot get into the customers' heads. It's all external stimuli. So you get to know what Steve's thinking, his insecurities, his fears, Diane's concerns and worries about Carol Ann, and what Robbie thinks, and ultimately what Tangina and the research people think as well. So it was a really good viewpoint on what is going on from other characters' points of view, which was really interesting, and I think that was the real highlight for me. And it was just a great read, and I had a great time with it, and it didn't take me long to read it. And even the dialogue was a little bit different, and there were other scenes there as well that didn't make it into the movie. For example, there was one scene that was described in pretty gory detail about, you know, how Diane at the end is in the swimming pool and all the skeletons come up and bubble up and swarm her in the muddy pool. Well, that's all well and good, and that was freaky in itself watching the movie. However, in the book, it describes how coffins are bursting out of the earth and blasting bodies and decaying flesh into the streets. So it's like a corpse bomb that goes off, and coffins are flying everywhere, and pieces of bone and flesh are flying everywhere as well. It was very, very graphic. If it ever got remade again, I'd like to see those kind of elements just for the shock value alone. But just on another note as well that I didn't mention at the start of the video is Poltergeist happens to be my favourite horror movie of all time, if you didn't gather. Alright, now let's talk about Poltergeist 2, the other side. Now, one mention I will make here about sequels. It's not very often that a sequel to a movie shapes up or measures up to the original in any way. It's very common for the original to be the best. That's why there's the term the original and the best. However, with Poltergeist 2, I think it's equally as good as the first one. I just really, really love it. And I picked this up pretty much straight after turning the back page of the first Poltergeist book. Immediately picked it up. I had them on digital and went into it straight away. The first Poltergeist novel was about 300 pages and the second one was about 187 pages, so I spent the entire Sunday afternoon reading it in pretty much one sitting. It was absolutely fantastic. The dialogue in the book is pretty much the same in the movie. However, I'll go through the plot if you're not aware of it, but no doubt you will be. So this one is about Carol Ann again being pursued by the entity, this time taking the form of the preacher Henry Kane. Now, the family have moved down to Arizona to live with Diane's mum, Grandma Jess, as she's known in the book that I didn't know before. So we have a name for the grandmother. And, you know, they're destitute, and what they're trying to explain at the end of the first book, the house implodes and disappears into another realm, which is a little bit hard to explain to the insurance company. So they keep sending letters to the insurance company, and they can't insure them for a house that disappeared or isn't there. So they're destitute. Steve is trying to scrounge up a living selling vacuum cleaners on the street, and they're living off the grandma, so she's actually supporting them while they figure out what to do. So they're not in a very good place. And the preacher comes calling one day, and you know the scene I'm talking about, where he has a confrontation with Steve at the door, asking him to let him in. And Julian Beck, who was the actor that played the Reverend, was terminally ill while playing the role, and you'll never forget those lines. They just chill you to your bone no matter how many times you see the movie. And it's where he says, "You're all gonna die in there, all of you, you're all gonna die." And that face, it just gives you nightmares, and it's really good for shock value. And I think the best thing about Poltergeist 2, especially in the book, is the introduction of Taylor, the Native American shaman. I think he was great in the movie. He was equally good in the book as well, because he's a very, very strong character. He's a Navajo Indian who is heavily steeped in Native American mysticism and magic, and he does real magic, and he's very spiritual, and he is very pivotal in helping the Freeling family again rescue Carol Ann from the clutches of the preacher. And there's a lot of backstory about the preacher and how he was a medium and made his followers follow him into the desert to be sealed up in a self-made tomb. Because he convinced them that the end of the world was coming. When the end of the world date came and went, the people wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let them. He sealed them in, and they all died. Now, the interesting thing was with this tomb that they all died in, the Freeling house was built directly on top of that tomb, which is why the spirits were very, very restless, and Carol Ann came into their proximity, and they just craved her pure life force, her light. And Yeah, I think the Native American mysticism and magic was very, very good. It went into a bit of detail about a bit of Taylor's story, about how he interacts with fellow Indians and what he does in terms of his magic. There's a scene in the movie where we see Robbie sitting in his tent with him, and he's got his face painted in war paint and scratches on his arm, and Diane comes out with their lunch and goes, "Hey, what's going on here, Robbie? Get inside." And then Diane and Taylor have a bit of an exchange about how Taylor was making him into a warrior. Now, the book goes into a bit more detail about what actually happened in the tent before Diane came out. And in the book, Taylor actually gave Robbie a couple of totems from his medicine bag to help him fight as a warrior, which was really, really good. Again, we see Tangina make an appearance as well. And a lot of the book pretty much goes the way the movie does, so it might have been a later script that James Caan received in order to do the novelisation, but it was a lot of fun, and I think getting inside the characters' heads again was great, and you don't know much about what's going on in Grandma Jess's head in the movie, but in the book you get a little bit of that, and the ending's very satisfying. Carol Ann comes back from the other side and everything is okay again until Poltergeist 3, of course, which just on the three movies, obviously Poltergeist and Poltergeist 2, the other side, are very, very strong. Poltergeist 3 is the weakest movie of the three. There are elements I quite like about it, but there's some things I don't as well. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience overall. Just completely immersed myself in all the lore, and the movies were, they were fun to watch, in addition to reading the books. So unfortunately, I didn't get to read The Omen. Maybe another time, but we'll see how that goes. So that is it for my update for week 2 of Horror Mayhem. Now, coming up next week, or this week when I'm filming this, is all about classic horror. Now, I have picked out my first read, and that is by Ramsey Campbell, called Dark Companions, a very early collection of his work from 1980. It has about 18 stories in here, and I'm sure to be able to tick off some items on my bingo scorecard with this. So hopefully I can get most of the bingo scorecard items checked off, but we'll see how we go. I've also planning on perhaps reading Night Shift by Stephen King, and there's another early one recommended by Greg over at another Bibliophile Reads called Dark Forces, which I may get into as well. So there's a lot of stories to read this week. Hopefully I can get through as many as I can and share my thoughts with you about those as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. We've hit the halfway mark of Horror Mayhem. It's been a fantastic experience so far. I have really enjoyed it, especially since it's my 3rd year as a host, and yeah, I am having a ball. So thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Offer up any comments below as per usual, and I'll deliver the best content I can. And until the next video, guys, happy reading.